Good evening, everybody. Just so that you all know, my colleagues know, I've been in the building for 45 minutes or so. I had the pleasure and opportunity of meeting with BWP and Associates, and Barbara, our superintendent, was there as well, as they wanted to just have a preliminary conversation about today's meeting. So I apologize for being late, but I have really been in the meeting talking to folks about this particular meeting. So it is now 6:12, and I'm calling this meeting to order. Today is December the 19th, 2018. The purpose of today's meeting was to discuss the superintendent search process. And again, we are very blessed and fortunate to have BWP here today. They will lead us through a discussion. I appreciate the fact that they have prepared a PowerPoint, so I would ask Mr. Kastner to take the mic.
First off, President White, Superintendent Williams, and Commissioners, we're very pleased to have this opportunity to launch the superintendent search. We hope in the most transparent way possible, we can explain how this all fits together and how we will be guests in your school system for the next several months. You live here every day. But right now, we've made the decision, and we're looking forward to working for the commissioners and the school board in representing you and finding the best candidate that we might find. We have, for the record, and it's public record, we've put a proposal together, and you'll find out who the three names are for BWP. We just might refer to them as black, white, and purple. But it's a search firm that started in the late 80s that's done almost 1,000 superintendent searches across the country, have over 50 associates like ourselves. But when it comes to how each group or team is put together, they're put together with a deliberate reason that they might reflect the community and have the experience in doing searches that are unique to each place. You have some information at your seats. The information you have is also available to the public. First, you have a format here that talks about the 4 parts of the search process. That's also on our website, BWP and Associates. You also have a copy of the PowerPoint that we'll be going through. We'll want to refer during the process of key decisions that we're going to need board direction when we had the opportunity to interview you, and it's certainly better to be here in person than going through a Zoom. That these key decisions, we're going to be needing your direction. We do not have to have everything finalized tonight, but we are going to need that in the process when we're going to communicate with potential candidates. You have a sheet that talks about potential advertisements. You also have a sheet that talks about a potential timeline. It seems, though, by having this opportunity to do this in December, that we'll be able to capture a lot of momentum when we start in January. In doing this, I think it's important that not only board members who've had the opportunity to read our resumes, but also I'd like my colleagues to have an opportunity to introduce themselves, tell you a little bit about what they bring to the table. And I would be happy to make a comment after they do. But first, Percy, if you want to come on up and introduce yourself, tell a little bit about your background. And in the end, when we are going to take questions, we'll do that as a team, whether it be from board members or any members of the public.
Before Mr. Mack begins, we had copies of the PowerPoint presentation made available online. I also think there are hard copies there at the back table. So anybody who would like to, who would prefer to look at a hard copy rather than on the screens, they're available to you. I'm sorry, Mr. Mack, go ahead.
Oh, no problem. Good evening to all. I'm Percy Mack, formerly taught for many years and have about 43 years of experience in education. Started out as a classroom teacher, assistant principal, coach, club sponsor, principal of a high school of 3,000 students. Moved from there to human resources at the school district, executive director of schools. I had the highest performing schools and the lowest performing schools in my district in DeKalb County of 100,000 students. Left there and went to Dayton, Ohio as deputy superintendent. After about 6 months, the superintendent decided that she was going to retire, and the board named me superintendent. I was superintendent there for 7 years. When I started out in Dayton, we were 614 out of 614 school districts in the state of Ohio. In 4 years, we moved from academic emergency to continuous improvement, but it took the entire community working together to make that happen. The board, the administration, the business community, the sheriff's department. We had a high absentee rate, and all the community came together to identify those students who were not coming to school, and we were able to bring those students in, speak to their parents, get them to school. Our graduation rate started at about 52%, and after the tenure there, our graduation rate was up in the middle 80s, about 82, 83% of our students who were graduating during that particular time. So it can be done. Now I work with aspiring superintendents, and I also teach at South Carolina State University in Orangeburg, school law and school leadership. And with that, have an opportunity to see superintendents, speak to superintendents. I've mentored superintendents over the years, and feel like with what is offered here in Rochester, it's a great opportunity for someone to come in as superintendent and do a very fine job here. So that's Percy Mack. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mack.
Good evening.
Good evening.
President White and school board members. My name is Paul McKendrick. My journey was very much like Percy's. I was a teacher, worked at higher ed at one point, going into public schools, been a coach, principal, high school principal, middle school principal. Loved every job that I was in. Just fell in love with middle school. If you've ever taught middle school, you know that's a difficult task, but I loved it because of the students that we had. I've been a superintendent also, superintendent in urban systems. And I mention that because I was successful in those systems, I think in part because of the program that I participated and graduated in at Harvard University, Harvard's Urban Superintendent's Program, and that was where I got my doctorate. And from there, I used those experiences in places where I worked. Worked in Long Beach Unified School District in California. There I was started as an executive assistant to the superintendent, and then moved into student attendant services as the director. And at first I didn't understand completely how that fit in with what happens in schools, but after I started working there, it gave me just a fuller picture and a fuller resume of working with children, because a lot of times the children will come to us with problems, and I then knew the resources that were available to help our children. From there, I became I've been superintendent twice, 11 years of experience as a superintendent. First was in Lynchburg, Virginia. Started there as a deputy superintendent. Had some of the same successes that Percy mentioned. In fact, when I got there, Virginia had one of the toughest, like New York, state assessments for students. And when I got there, we had only 17% of our schools were accredited. And I just realized we needed to do something else. And so after my first year, we went up to about 72% of our schools. And then for the next year, 84. And then after that, we were either at about 94% or 100% of our schools becoming fully accredited. And I attribute a lot of that to the fact that we focus on instruction, we focus on leadership, we developed leadership academies, we made sure that our staff went through that process in order to become a principal. We just had some wonderful work there. Our schools were high schools for 6 or 7 years, were named in the top 1,000 schools in the country, and it had a lot to do with the fact that though we were 55% free and reduced lunch, we had a lot of students taking AP classes. And that just spurred all of the outreach that we used those successes for to get community engagement, so much so that by the time that I left, we had 240 business school partnerships. And these were ones where people actively took part in helping us, giving us resources and so forth. From there, I moved on to Tuscaloosa, Alabama as superintendent there. I was there for 5 years, retired in 2016. Some of the same successes. One in particular that I point to is the fact that we had a graduation rate of below 60. And by the time that I left, we had worked so that our graduation rate was far better than that. We were at 88% of our students graduating. One school had a 91% graduation rate. But it was all because we worked together, had great principals, put in wonderful programs for teacher evaluation and leadership of staff. And so I love doing this work because I can then help people who are going into this position what are the things they need to do to excel. And also, like Percy, I'm working with principals also. When I retired, I started a company called the MAC Leadership Group, and the whole purpose of that is to work with principals, because a lot of times principals start positions having no idea or a faint idea of the work that's involved in finding out that they need to get some focus on student achievement, instruction, teaching and learning, and that's what we try focusing on in coaching principals. I'm thrilled to be here. We had a very good talk with President White, and we're looking forward to finding some really good people to come in for you to attack and be successful in a lot of the challenges that you have. Thank you.
Thank you.
For my part, I'm a former superintendent in Albemarle County, which is in Charlottesville, Virginia. I was there for 11 years. Prior to that, I worked in Prince George's County, Maryland, a system of about 100,000, Frederick County, a system of about 50,000. So I've had opportunities to spend 25 years in Maryland, again, experience with the unions, and then going to Virginia. Upon my retirement there, I became part of Cambridge Strategic Services, where we have done strategic planning in that company, which I'm now president, for over 1,000 school systems across the country. And I now do work across the country and working with different systems that use their strategic plan as the umbrella of how all the business is done in the system and the accountability that you need to have, which is where you're poised at this point of your implementation of your plan. In addition, I had the opportunity of really getting to know New York. I was a peer reviewer when it came to Race to the Top. Now, maybe that doesn't sound like much, but there were 3,000 applicants and they chose 60 of us. And frankly, I was involved in making a vote for you to get $650 million and was quite impressed. The notebook for New York was about this thick. And we've got a chance to meet some of the people in New York and understand a little bit about the governance, how everything kind of fits together in that model, knowing it is unique to each district, and I don't know if all the promise of the Race to the Top got fulfilled, but at least I got an understanding of how it works in a state. I also have been a professor have taught school finance, and I've also mentored a number of superintendents as part of a group in Virginia. And this is about my 30th search with BWP. And so we have had experiences in systems that are poised to reach that next level. They aren't quite there yet, and we've had the opportunity, and we'll speak to it a little bit later, of getting to know your school system much better, but we're just beginning on that. So what I'd like to do, I'd like to go through a little bit about the process here. When we're starting out, what's our purpose here? We have a process that we know that will work. And we would hope that when we went through the interview, when we were trying to explain that the process to be successful is involving a transparency and engagement with the community. And we stand out and we use that as we think a strength. This isn't just a decision by a school board, even though this is the most important decision the school board will vote on. It's a community decision, and you all well know that. And we're trying to recruit highly qualified candidates, and we work for the board. We'll follow your guidance, your guidelines, but you also can expect from us that we want to advise you if there's pluses and minuses of the decisions you make. You need to hear both sides. And this isn't our first rodeo, folks. We know how this thing works, and we know how we can help you make it work. So when we talk about tailoring this search to your needs, many of our searches are different than yours. And in some places, there's different laws, whole different set of laws when we were doing the search in Columbus, Ohio. But we can tell you what process they used. Whole different set when you're going down in Sumter, South Carolina, where the rule is by law that you have to have the 3 finalists out in the public. And we can tell you about the strengths and, well, you've actually made some of these decisions already. And I agree with the decisions, and some of the transparency you're capturing is going to enable us to get kind of the best of both worlds. But tonight, we're trying to get into the point of finding some more information and launching the search. There are 4 steps to the process, but tonight we're only talking about specifications. We're trying to set the table to begin this process to find how we can get engagement and the voices of your community, including board members, in getting data that we will then bring back before you with a report after we've had the opportunity to work with your community and recommend a leadership profile. So the recruitment, the assessment, the selection, all of the outline of that process you can read in the flyer. We'll explain a lot of those details when we have a chance to meet with you firsthand individually, and also when we meet with your community. The timeline that we're going to work on, we're going to need to have information on that. One of the things we want to be thinking about is we would want 3 days. Maybe we come in the night before, we stay 2 full days. We want to follow a schedule that board members will approve of meeting whoever we're going to need to meet. And in doing that, we want to make sure we also, in doing this process and having public forums, that no one in this community can say they didn't have an opportunity to have input on that. And in doing that also, when we get into the community engagement and we talk about the different parts on that, I normally would look up here, and I'm finding my eyes here aren't quite as good as I would like them to be. So I'm going to have to end up talking about, when we talk about community engagement, we're talking about the entire community. We're trying to look for 3 basic things. What are the strengths of your school system? What are the challenges you're going to face? What are the qualities and characteristics you want to see in the superintendent? We then are going to use that to develop a profile, but at the same time, you need to know that in the community engagement process, when we will come in, we will interview each individual board members. Those interviews usually take 45 minutes to an hour. We'll try to work that around your schedule. One of the times by coming in the night before. We also can do that during the time we're here during the full day. In identifying these qualities, we then will want to meet with representatives of various groups. You've had the opportunity in the past of bringing groups together, whether it's the faith-based community, whether how you might involve with your employees and your parents, the business community, whether it's higher education. Whoever it is we will meet with, we will work with staff and the board to make sure we're getting the right people. And when you have the three of us, we can have 3 meetings going on at every time. We'll talk about the forums of how we want to do them, how many we should have. I know you organized around 3 different areas, and so if that's the way you do it and you want to have one in the northeast, northwest, or the south, you'll have to decide on that. So that information has yet to be decided, and we'll work on that. We also are going to have an online survey. And the online survey, first, we will give you opportunities to see examples of surveys, but we want to get that out on your website. A few weeks ago, we were down in Sumter, South Carolina, a system of about 16,000. And we talked about the online survey, had it up and running, and by the time at the end of the first day, they had 500 responses. By the end of the second day, it was over 1,000. What happens is when you get the information from the online survey, you have quantitative data that will show trends for your community. But when you do the qualitative data and you're talking to the people, you want to see if there's a match. You also at times want to disaggregate information like we did there, where they had in that first group of 1,000, 200 students. We wanted to hear what the students were saying and seeing if it was similar to what was being said by either members of the school system or the entire community. The data, we think, is necessary. You want to be able to have evidence, you want to have the time to spend, and you're beginning also to tell the community that if we were going to walk in front of a forum, the 3 of us are going to present what we might say is this. The school board has trusted us to come in to the community as visitors and take verbatim, word for word, anything that you're saying. And we're going to report it back to the school board, and we're going to show trend data. They're showing a trust in this type of transparency, and no one is not going to have an opportunity to have that voice. We're also going to tell them, in the way this search is being organized, well, we're going to develop a leadership profile, and we're going to use that to vet candidates. In the end, after the board has had an opportunity to look at who we might recommend that they consider to interview, after they go through their first round of interviews and narrow it down, the finalist candidates are going to be out in the public. Within 5 minutes, you'll see if they fit the profile. And you need to engage with your board members, your commissioners. And you need to give your input as you see these people when they have their day in the city. And so at that point, you're re-engaging your group. They're going to tell you how these people stand up and perform. They're going to develop some opinions, and they're also going to do a lot of homework because they're going to know somebody wherever they're from. But at the same time, they are not going to know everything, because you as a board, when you do in-depth interviews, you're going to be looking at the Google searches, you're going to be looking at deep reference checks, you're going to go beyond just someone who maybe could do a good job in front of a group and just have that gift. You're going to know the whole balance of their entire body of evidence where they are as a candidate and how they might best match and be the person that separates themselves from the others. But by doing the process this way, I still think you will be able to attract a pool, and in attracting a pool, you're going to be able to have some quality candidates. So the community engagement process also leads to when you're getting into the advertisements. Now, you will note that there is a handout in front of you that talks about advertising outlets. Now, this is just the generic outlets that we normally use, but we can also tell you a couple pluses and minuses. For example, we're finding more of the candidates do online advertising, not necessarily paying $1,200 for a little blurb in Ed Week. If you want to have the little blurb, we can pay the $1,200. You can say it's there, but rather we think it's better having 60 days for a lot less money. And we also do that with AASA, the Superintendent's Association. We do believe it would be important to use the National Association of Black School Educators and that audience, particularly for a diverse school system. We'd recommend that. We want to use your New York associations of your school boards. We want to use the administrators associations. And if we've missed anyway, how the Boise's do, how they advertise, we want to find out more about that. And we also want to use Harvard. The Harvard Urban Association, but Paul and Percy both have worked with them. Deborah Jewel Sherman, the whole network of that Harvard group, then they put it out. It reaches a lot of different people for candidates. And there might be some other areas that we might get your advice on to consider. The advertising plan can go from $2,500 to $3,500. We're going to need the board to give us their opinion on that. We're also going to need to develop an announcement, which is going to have to pass the board. We'll show samples of how we're going to communicate that, because one of the things that we're going to have to do, and it's going to get back to the timeline, we want to know how long to keep the advertisement up and when is going to be the deadline for applications. And by mentioning that, we have a timeline. Now, this timeline is talking about where we are here on December 19th and how we want to be back in January when you can determine when you'd want us to visit, how we can work it in within our schedules, and hopefully the weather, which I think is something we have to factor in. So I guess we have to have a backup date. And then we're going to talk about the report that we would then bring back to you and then ask your recommendations for the profile. We have talked about recruiting and an application due date of March 10. If you do March 10, you're done with the National AASA conference, where we have people there. We run into people, and sometimes we can talk about your program. And then we can talk about how you would go through the interviews. And when we do present candidates, we'll give you possible interview questions and guide you through that and talk to you about the do's and don'ts in the interview and all of that. And so this does not have to be decided tonight, but we will need to want to get that decided when we come in and talk about the community engagement. And then we certainly want to know that the board members in your busy schedules, it's real important that you find dates where you're going to commit to being part of that interview process. So as you look through that and we talk about going into the vacancy, you're also going to need to want to talk about salary parameters. My rule of thumb on this, if you advertise and you say regionally and nationally competitive, well, what's regionally and nationally competitive? And since this is and should be a national search, that's ambiguous. Sometimes you might want to consider, well, the current superintendent's salary is, let's just say, the base plus an annuity is $240,000. Let's just say that. Well, $240,000 is a lot of money. But if you go to Texas, a superintendent in a system this size is probably making $375,000. That's Texas. So one of the things you want to look at, and we need to work with you, you need to use data. The way I think we'd want to do it is we'd want you to give us some systems that you would use as benchmark systems. So let's take Buffalo, for example. They recently had a superintendent. Their base salary right now, I understand, if I'm correct, is around $300,000. comparable size system. So what you want to do is you want to find 8 to 10 systems, and you want to find who's the highest, who's the lowest, and you want to consider at least being about in the middle. But we don't know what that data is. But I'm going to tell you, folks, you go cheap, you get cheap. And what you need to base it on and have the credibility to base it on is some evidence. And then you're going to want to compare it to whether someone is a veteran superintendent, or perhaps if you have someone that hasn't had the experience yet, you might want to put incentives in their contract. We could advise you about that. But frankly, you need to be competitive in whatever compensation you're going to use. This is not an easy job. This is not a place that you can learn on the job. You need to have candidates that are going to have comparable experience in similar type districts. And that's going to eliminate some candidates. Let me tell you what I mean by that. There's 180,000 school systems in the United States. Only 2% have more than 20,000 students. So there's a lot of great superintendents out there that have wonderful skills that don't understand the complexity of a diverse urban system, of a system that has ESOL and SPED, has poverty, and yet at the same time you want all these children. I've noticed some of the trend data on your AP that keeps getting larger, which is impressive. All this type of thing has a complexity to it, and you well know that. But that means it's going to narrow the pool, but it also doesn't stop by having a good pool, because there are people that have a passion for doing this work, and we know that. And so while we talk about the salary, we also want to get to the point, I got to keep changing this here. I think we're going back to the timeline, and I think the last two slides are related to the timeline. And folks, we can take care of that. The process that we've talked about and the community engagement, you understand. What I want to get to is something that's also important to us, and I want you to understand that we want to be able to market your school system. And in marketing your school system, you need to understand that candidates are interviewing you as well as you're going to be interviewing candidates. And so when we are talking about the board unity and participation, transparency, we're also talking about confidentiality. We've had recent cases where we've done a search and we've had a board member contact a board member from another school system about a candidate. The candidate withdrew. We have to have the commitment from board members on following the rules of confidentiality to have the quality search. By you having the 3 candidates in the end, you're creating that transparency. But along the way, you got to let us do our job. If you have a person that you'd like us to consider, give us their name. Don't you contact them, we'll contact them. And we'll certainly take any names and try to see if they have an interest. But it's important to follow that and keep the integrity of the search. That didn't happen in Columbus, Ohio. If you want to read about it, the first search firm, there were some board members that crossed the line and they had to disband the search and start over. That's when we came in. The intentions were not bad. They were just trying to find the best people. But all of a sudden, they did FOIA requests, they found emails, they saw names. You can imagine of the people whose names got out there, and they worked with school systems. We had one person, for example, whose name got out there, and the system was getting ready to do a millage vote. Board member called 11:30 at night, my superintendent's name's there. We're doing a millage vote, we don't want his name out there, and we don't even know if you're going to even consider if he should be a candidate. So there are people's lives that are at stake, and it's just a sensitive issue that maybe you're aware of this, but we have to at least point out certain examples of what we don't want to have, even with some good intentions. So when we look at that and the confidentiality, we're very serious about that. And then we're also talking about, it can be said, when you develop this process that has a transparency to it, sometimes people, there's never enough transparency for people. But in our opinion, the road that you've taken is probably the best to get the best candidates and also to communicate to your public and giving them an opportunity to weigh into you. We think that the choice you've made here has far, far more pluses than negatives, and we very much can support that. But here's something else, and I'm going to invite Paul and Percy to come in if they want to add any more comments. Board members or commissioners, you all have, and we have looked at your impressive resumes as you've had them on your website. You all bring considerable individual talent. You all have individual passions. And when you look at the concentric circles there, you're going to have some variances in opinion. But in the very center, right now, is the superintendent search. We have found that it creates unity in a community. Everybody wants to get it right. And at this point, we're talking about if you're going to hire somebody, you're not going to hire them on a split vote and get the best candidate. You want to be as close to unanimous, 6-1, 7-0. But maybe in that room, before you make that final decision, you might not all be there. But when it comes out, and you're trying to stand behind someone, and this is where there's a tension here that has nothing to do with you. You have some new board members, and you could have some new board members within a year. If we can get it right, and everybody sees who these people are, and they have the support, then they're going to know they've got a quality candidate that should be able to be something that any board would want to embrace. That's where transparency is important. Of course, we hope some of the 4 other positions that might come up, some of you are going to run again. We'd love to see that continuity. But the fact is, that's a reality. I've been through that before. The board that hired me was, in 6 months, wasn't the same board anymore. It all worked out. But it was still a continuity issue that you cannot ignore. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to come together, and you're trying to get to the point when all of your individual talents are there. Look at the cogs in the wheel there. The individual talents mean so much more when you collectively work together as a team. Now, you magnify your impact. And frankly, folks, this is your watch right now. To get this right, to continue the progress that you've started, it's important. So I look at this report that was written by, what do you call the name of this report? A review of the Rochester educational system. It's public record. Our opinion is this report isn't complete. We don't have the response of the school system. We think it points out some things, but we've seen these things in other systems. But we want to see the response of the school system, and we want to show both copies of the report to our candidates. And then they can see some of the progress that maybe might be noted, but we just think that that's the way it was intended. It wasn't intended to be in isolation. It was intended to be a composite of both sides. At the same time, I want to encourage you to understand, when you're talking about this individual and collective lens of the system, everybody's watching your board meetings. They're looking at your votes. They're deciding, do I want to work in a school system, they're going to look at how people are addressed. Because it's a marriage, in a sense, that's going to happen to a partnership between a superintendent that would move a family in a community, and is not coming here just to stay a few years. So you are in a fishbowl as a board and a team. And you want to be thinking about, as you're working through this, as you're working towards a superintendent search, to show the type of unity that you'd like to have. Another way of looking at this, and you, I really believe this, and frankly, in every search that I've had the pleasure of being part of, it does show that people of goodwill, working for a common good, will always try to make that best decision. That's where you are in this point of time. In the next several months, we're working for you to try to find that best person to lead your system. We don't carry magic bullets. Your profile is going to demand so much, whoever that person is. We just hope that they're going to have 80% that they could accomplish. But they're going to have to have proven it already, and they wouldn't be doing it on the job until, I don't think they'll have that same credibility. So you're going to want somebody with experience and have some capabilities that can work with the complexity of your system and making a difference for your children. So at this point, I've tried to give an overview of the process. I've given you some details for you and the community to look at in the timeline. And then when we leave tonight, after answering any questions from the board or the public, we'll do some more organization and getting ready to come back in January. So I'd like to conclude my remarks here. I'd like my team to be together with me right now in case you have some comments or any other comments come up.
Any questions or comments by members of the board?
I don't mean this to be a superficial question, but what does BWP stand for?
It's the name of the three people that did the firm out in the Midwest, in the Chicago area. And if you look at I don't even remember their names myself. If you look at the name when we did the RFP, the report, you'll see their individual names. That's why I just call black, white, purple.
Any?
A couple of questions.
Sure.
Dr. Kastner, I see that your firm, one of your locations is in Charlottesville, Virginia. And my question is, not necessarily, it's a little unrelated, but I do want to know an answer. How has your firm supported the healing of that community's racial tension?
First off, I live in Charlottesville, Virginia. The corporate office we have is in Illinois. So our firm is not directly related to Charlottesville, but since you asked the question, over a year ago in that community, there were people that came into Charlottesville that were carrying loaded assault rifles that had shields that had points on them, that were using canisters where they would light them and they were like flamethrowers. Unfortunately, Charlottesville was not prepared for that. And ever since then, communities have learned how such atrocious things, the stars just met. And the community is still going through healing. There was a trial last week where the person that chose to use a car that ended up causing a death is going to probably be in prison for the rest of their life. So everybody in the Charlottesville community, in their own way, has developed a sensitivity for how things can get such out of whack. And I think communities, even in telling the story with you tonight, need to learn how you can't take certain things for granted and you have to find ways to do that. But our firm itself, I have a house in the Albemarle area. But I am sensitive to what you're saying, but people are still learning from it, and the pain's still there. But also, we hope it can be used as an example for other communities to never take for granted the preparation that's necessary to protect people. And it just is unfortunate.
And then just one last question I have. I think I may have asked this of you before, but the reputation of this board nationally, I'm told, is not very good. And so with a reputation on a national level that this board is dysfunctional, how can you persuade candidates, and I'd like to have some of the best qualified candidates to be considered for this position. How would you help to persuade them to consider Rochester?
Let me give another example. We were doing a search in Sumter, South Carolina that had 5 incoming board members, and we just started the superintendent search. When we did the community engagement process, and we were able to meet with the business community, all the different community people, we saw that the entire community was so ready to embrace getting a new superintendent, working with the new board. And they were going to be involved in a process where they were going to have the 3 candidates that were going to be out there for a day in the system, and they were going to get invested with that. There's kind of one way of looking at it. The what, maybe there is a reputation. So what? The issue now is now what? And when I was suggesting to you the now, how you respond possibly to the report that talked about some of the governance issues, and what do you all want to say as a board that when you have a new superintendent, how you want to go to whatever direction you want to go. When you are working in board meetings and you're looking how you're working as a team, or even when you, in the most sincere way, are going to look candidates in the eye and say, why do you want to come here? And are you going to be staying here? It's you putting your best foot forward and being yourselves and getting people to know you. Because I think whatever reputation, that point is superficial. It's now what? We're at a different day. And now, if there have been some things you might have learned, then let's look how you build upon where your success is and look at, in a far more positive way, of a glass half full. So I think you're in control of that message. And I think as we get to know you better, we're going to be able to share that. Collectively, first off, I think each of you are in this for one reason. And you look at the backgrounds that you have in your lives. You're here for the children. And I think that's what a superintendent wants, but it needs to be coming from you. And I think that's the type of thing that when you build that type of relationship. So I hope that does a little bit to answer your question.
Thank you.
I know that we would be looking to have a robust pool of candidates to choose from. When we're looking, what would be your contingency if you were to bring us a pool of candidates, and that among that pool that we could not find one that we felt that we did not find enough to be able to make a finalist pool that we thought would be a good fit for our community?
Then we're going to keep working for you.
What would that look like?
We'll keep going out and finding more. And we're not going to ask for any more money. I've not had this happen before, but I think you're going to have to see if we find somebody that you feel you want to bring forth to your community. So we're going to stay with you. And I'm saying we're not going to add, it'll be a cost, as far as we come to the community and, visit and things, but we're not going to charge you anymore. I think that, when you listen to the student on the video on your website, and they're saying, if you have a child that says, we recognize that the results aren't as good as we want them, but we want to make ourselves believable again, that when we bring candidates before you, and you're going to be working with them, and you're going to develop that ownership, I just think you're going to find that person. And I'm really optimistic, but I'm going to tell you, we're in this, we don't do this for the money. This is part of our profession. Each of us has been in public education probably well over 45 years each. So we do this because we think that we can help work with places, and this can be part of education. And the thing is, I get more passion for working with a school system like yourselves. They're just trying to take that next level. This is what we signed up for. We didn't sign up for easy. We signed up for the type of work that you need to bring these kids with the students. You've listened to my colleagues here. They have done this type of work in communities that at one point when they got hired wanted to take that next step, and they did. And I hope in a small way I've done that too, but I think they've done it in more comparable urban settings where I think the challenges are greater. So I didn't answer that question as good as I could. Can someone give me a hand here?
One of the things we're going to do in going out into the community, we're going to develop a profile that we will bring the information back to you, and along with the board to develop a profile of what this board is looking for in a superintendent candidate. So as we go out looking, we're looking for those people in that profile. So with that, your chances of not finding somebody is very small, because you know, we're going to bring you enough that you'll get more than 3. You know, we want you to have a tough decision getting down to 3 for your choice. But it's going to be based on your profile, the profile that you say, these are the things we want to see in the superintendent. That's what we're going to look for.
So one of you talked about, you know, letting you all do your job that we hired you to do. I believe it was you. Yeah, so, you know, I just wanted to throw out there that I really want us to be able to have local candidates that if they align with the profile that they do come before us, because I know a lot of times with a national search, people may feel that if we have good local candidates that we just have to overlook them because we've paid this money for you to go out to all of these other states. But I do want to make sure that if we do have local candidates here, that they're not being blocked. And I don't know what that would look like amongst us if we gave you a charge to bring us so many candidates, and then we decide, I don't know. But it just stuck with me when you said, you know, let you do your job. And I know that we have been accused of micromanaging a lot in other areas in our district. But I just want to make sure, because it's so important, that if we do have local candidates, that we are also given an opportunity to look at them.
Ms. Shepherd, I was remiss in explaining our process, and I'm glad you brought that up. I really am. We will present to your board 100% of the people that make application. If we recommend, let's say, 5 or 6 people, and if there is a local candidate that we did recommend, then you know they're going to be in the pool. If there's a local candidate that we did not recommend, because when we recommend, we're going to base that upon all the information that we have in regard to not only their resumes, but the background checks, everything that we're going to have. You choose as a board if you want to bring one of those people in to consider to interview. You have that control. We feel that's the transparency we want to have with you. What you need to consider, again, is, or others, is getting people to put their name in the BWP process when they go online. Because when they go online, they've got to answer all the questions. They've got to put in their resumes. They've got to put in their transcripts. They've got to put in their references, all of that. And then it allows us to do our job of vetting them against the pool. But in the end, you can accept or reject, or you can, again, have the control of bringing someone else in. And we've had that happen before. One of the things that I'm just going to be honest with you that's difficult for us, if you have a local candidate that's in a school system, we aren't able to do as good a job doing reference checks because we don't want to violate their confidentiality. But you, as commissioners, you see these people every day, and you might know far more about some of their significant strengths that would perhaps add information to the pool that we could discuss, but again, you have the control whether you want to bring them forward and have them be part of the interview. So thanks for bringing that up.
So I have a question that sort of piggybacks on that one, and it's not a hypothetical. Someone, and this is not going to be the last time it's happened, and it's going to happen to every board member up here. Someone approached me from the community and said, hey, listen, I have an ideal candidate. Happens to be a person who at one time was local. And you've probably had this situation. This person is up for another superintendency. What do you do in a situation like that? So as I understand your rules, or your requirements, you would want me to give you the name of that person, because we shouldn't be talking to these people, right? So I give you the name of that person. What do you do in terms of notifying the board if the candidate, this potential candidate, is viable and might be gone if the board didn't act? Do you handle them differently? How do you do that?
A lot of it is a candidate's choice. If they choose to apply to BWP, to our site, then we're going to vet them. And when we present candidates to a school board, one of the questions we're going to ask the candidates, are you involved in any other superintendent searches? If you are, what's the timeline of those searches? We're not asking you to decide if you'd take that one or this one. And I says, that's something that you're going to have a conversation with the board, and you're going to have to develop that credibility. And what you need to do, in our opinion, as we're advising them, is be transparent and upfront. So we just think that it's in their control in a situation like that.
My question is a variation on the theme that Commissioner Shepard raised. If the community feedback appears to be bifurcated, where a significant portion of the community says they want to see a local, homegrown, deep roots candidate, and another portion of the community says, we just want the best, we don't care how far away they come from, we don't care whether they have a history with our community, Rochester, or even the surrounding area. I can envision, especially depending on how wide your conversations are with our community and whether they include the business community and the political community, that you will get two very different answers to the question, what does your ideal superintendent look like? Do you have suggestions on how the board should navigate that kind of feedback in its development of our profile for a candidate?
I'm going to answer that, I hope, the right way here. When you have a day in the city for, let's just say, 2 or 3 finalists, obviously people are going to have opinions. They aren't going to have all the information, of all the deep background information, even to the point when you're getting into background checks, all of this. Of course, we're not going to bring anyone out for a day in the city without having done the background checks. Give you an example out in Montgomery County, Maryland. They had a great candidate. They wanted to make her a superintendent. They did a background check and found out that she had declared bankruptcy. All of a sudden, in a system with the amount of billions of dollars they were spending, that hurt her credibility. So things like that we want to make sure we don't want surprises. In the end, though, you're elected officials. That's your job. It's not to take a vote. It's asking people to weigh in, and the people you trust. And I think it's something that boards, and they will be as conscientious as they can. I know in Columbus, this last search, when we had 3 people that were out there, there happened to be 2 that were highly regarded. It took them 4.5 hours before they made the decision. I mean, that was a tough decision. I think they couldn't have gone wrong with either one. So we hope we can reach that situation, but I think by the transparency that you have and people that will call people in those types of communities, I think that's your friend. If it causes differences of opinion, we're going to have those anyway. But I think in this place, because you've involved engagement, I don't think you can prevent that happening, but I think in the end, it's your job.
I have a question. We had a search years back, and the board at that time was looking at this candidate. I believe she was from black female from Alabama, I believe she was, and it came to surface that there had been some issues. Well, she was able to explain what had happened, which said to me, we could have supported this candidate, but we did not. That pressure came at this time from the unions, and it really hit the media. So my question to you, if there were a candidate that surfaced similar to this situation that the board experienced years back, how would you help us to control the message that gets out there into the community?
Here's a situation that can happen. Sometimes you have superintendents that part ways with the school board, even though they've done great work. And there's been a buyout. We'd want to Google and have all that information and want to find out, well, why did the buyout occur? What were the things that they brought to the table? In many cases it happens, you have a new board that didn't hire the person. In the end, you're going to have to see how compelling their work was and what they were able to do with the children. And ultimately it comes down to that. It's doing your homework. It's even to the point of, at the point of having 2 board members selected to talk to the board chair of that system. Tell us the story, board member to board member. And then all of a sudden you're going to have information that's going to give you comfort one way or another of whether that's the right person or not. So we would encourage and help you in the sense of giving options for you to have that comfort that you're going to have. You know, you want to do due deliberations. This isn't one where you want to go quick on. And if it means taking an extra week to do some of that work, we would encourage that. Now, one of the things we aren't seeing as much anymore is site visits. The reason, there's so much transparency for any superintendent in this country right now. Everything's out there on them that you don't need to try to get involved with that. And you're going to be getting your information, the same quality information in other ways. But we have seen boards that have done that. It's not our place to recommend you do or you don't. We just don't think it's as much as a bang for the buck.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Each of you had, well, I know that 2 of you had indicated that you mentor administrators. And I know many search firms have, let's say, pools of people that they have relationship with. Do we have an assurance that even if I know you said you'd give us 100% of the people who applied, or you'd show us 100% of the applicants into the pool, but I want to make sure that if there is someone who's not in your, I'm trying to find a word, in your farm team, because that's not on your farm team.
We do not have
They don't
pools.
have a farm.
We do not. Okay. And frankly, each search we do is unique. And this is a narrow pool here of people in this. Now, you know, you've got a group of people in great city schools, and you probably work with that association that, that know each other, but we don't work with that group. So I think we probably have in our RFP that we don't have a given pool of candidates. We just don't.
And the thing is, I know people say that, like, we don't have an established, written, in-stone team, but, like, I know that I have go-to people. When I need certain things done, I have a set of go-to people. What I'm asking you, and I'm just saying it again to make sure that I'm ultimately clear, that if someone comes out of left field that happens to be awesome, because they, you know, that you didn't know before, do they have an equal shot?
Absolutely. Now, wait, there's one thing I have to qualify. we're not going to recruit a candidate that we've placed someplace else. We honor that. If we have a great...
So you don't poach your people?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
We give a 5, now you actually have, and I just signed something that came from your attorney that talked about, we didn't use the word poach in the language, but we did say that we wouldn't go after anyone for 5 years. I'd love to have a candidate here for 5 years, but my point is, that's just a matter of integrity for us. We won't do that.
Yeah, that was the a question I was going to ask, and I've asked it before, and I'm glad that you responded the way that you did, and thank you to Carl for putting that in the contract that the board still has to approve, I think, because we haven't seen it yet, and we haven't approved it yet. But that was, as many people know, that was a big concern of mine about search firms, that there is, for lack of a better phrase, poaching that goes on. You place somebody, not you all, you place somebody in one place, then you have another district that you're working for, and then you take the candidate that you previously placed, you remove him and put him in the new district, and then you place another superintendent in the district. That has been a concern of mine. I've made that observation, so thank you for addressing that publicly. And again, thank you, Carl, and the board for addressing that issue in the contract. Yes.
So that makes me think another question. The idea behind poaching comes from the sense that there aren't enough candidates out there, like you're needing more people. What is your experience of numbers of applicants in most searches, or in searches in districts of this size or districts with certain reputations?
What you have is once a lot of the pool is determined on the profile, because everybody doesn't meet the same profile. In other words, some districts want people who've had sitting superintendent experience. Some district wants people who have experience in similar size districts. Even though they may not have been a superintendent, they were an area superintendent and were responsible for 25,000, 30,000 students. And so that person would come up on the sheet. So it's really dependent upon, because as we said earlier, the superintendents are interviewing you as you are interviewing them. They're watching and they're making decisions if they will apply. In other words, everybody that applies, we'll have a record for, and you will get everybody who applies. But I would say, it could range anywhere from 30 to 50 people who will apply, depending on where they're from, where they want to go, where they want to take their family. All those things filter in. It's just like any other corporation where people have to move families, or they may not have to move, they're local, to a particular location. So it just depends, anywhere from 30 to 50 people. You may even have more, but usually that's your range.
So it's generally been your experience, there are plenty of candidates.
Now, Percy and I are going to disagree. Okay. I think it's going to be a smaller pool for this system than a system that size isn't the factor and the complexity of the school system itself. I would say 30 might be a reason, but when you're looking down to it, we just want that top 2 or 3 to give you a hard choice. So we're looking for the quality of it and the track record of proven experience. I'd love to have more, that's no problem, but I'm just being realistic. We noticed that in Columbus, Ohio. Even in Columbus, for example, you've got 614 school systems. Columbus was the largest. So all the other systems, they're all under 5,000. I'm talking about 500 or more of them. In fact, 575 of them. And here you're dealing with the big 5, which is you're part of. You're in unique space. And so we're just going to have to play this out. But again, wanting you to over-expect the quantity of it. We just want to get the quality piece.
So a follow-up to the question on poaching, but let's assume it's the opposite. You have one of the superintendents that you have placed who sees the posting and approaches you because he or she has been there for 5 years or longer with a track record, and things are not working out because their board has changed and is interested in applying. Would you entertain them as a candidate?
After 5 years, yes. But we've been forthcoming. Well, frankly, we normally use 3 years. You chose to use 5 years. I'm not going to argue with that at all. I'm just saying we're comfortable that we had normally used the 3 years, beginning of a term. But we're very cautious about our integrity on that. But thanks for asking the question.
Okay, I think we've addressed most of the questions from the board. There is a portion of the agenda where we turn over the podium to citizens. Just so that you gentlemen know, and I might have mentioned this to you, Steve, that we ask folks to call in and indicate whether they want to speak, and so we're on that portion of the agenda. I'd ask, and I think you said you can do this, stick around in case there are questions. If there are questions from citizens, they will direct them to me, and then obviously you're sitting there, you could respond. So I'd just ask that you take a seat, and then our citizens will take the podium. We have 3 people who called in who asked for an opportunity to speak. We'll begin with Howard Eagle. Folks should know we've had a couple experiences where we talked about the fact that sometimes our citizens get frustrated with the 3-minute time frame, that we ought to have more open forums and forums that are specifically directed towards a topic. The topic today is, of course, search firms. So people who are taking the podium do not have the traditional 3-minute time limit. I would say to all speakers, be cognizant of the fact that if you speak beyond, for extended period of time, you're in fact cutting off the right and opportunity of other citizens. Now, Mr. Eagle, you happen to be the first speaker, but I would say that to every speaker that speaks today, although you do not have the 3-minute time limit, there will be no buzzer. Be cognizant of the fact that there are other people who might want to address the group as well. Mr. Eagle.
Okay. Good evening. I know Dave signed up. Who else signed up to speak?
I have Addie Sturgis and David Walling.
I think Ms. Sturgis left, didn't she? I believe she left. She got tired of waiting. She thought there was a filibuster going on. I think she left, didn't she? So, Dave, I got a lot to say. I have a lot to say, statements, and then I have some questions. But, Dave, when you want me to give it a break, just let me know and you can come on up. Or would you like to go ahead of me? If that's all right, you can go ahead of me. I have a lot to say.
Go ahead. It looks like he's willing to listen. Go ahead.
So, good evening to everybody. I want to say to the doctors that you might not know that there are, I think, substantial numbers of people in this community who don't want you here. We don't feel that we needed you in order to find the best candidate. And we know that that's practice, that's standard practice, if you will, especially for so-called large urban school districts to hire a search firm, and with this idea that we're going to end up with better candidates and better choices and so forth. But this district has been through this process numerous times. And to tell you the truth, came out with some real duds. One of them got ran out of this community, literally. So some of us don't necessarily believe that you need to be here. We think we could have saved the money. We don't follow the idea that your company, the 7 board members, are smarter, have more brains, more understanding than those of us who are parents, who are activists, who are educators in this district for decades. and know much more than you'll ever know about the dynamics and the history of what's going on in this district. We don't believe that your firm and the 7 of them are smarter than your firm, the 7 of them, and 14 of us from the community. There could have been 14 of us from the community, and I'm not saying us to include myself. I may not have been, but it could have been 14 grassroots, grounded people who represent others in the community who would have been a part of this process from beginning to end. The president of the board put forth a proposal like that to develop an advisory group that would be a part of this process from beginning to end. Would have even helped make the decision about whether or not to hire you. But that was rejected by the majority of the board. Instead, another board member put forth a counter proposal, the one who's, if it wasn't so serious, it would be ironic that she's not here tonight. I know she's hospitalized, I know that, and not only because we talked about it, I already knew that. But she's not here. So she put forth this proposal that said, essentially, the community should not be involved, not at any deep level, until after the search firm has narrowed this down to 3 finalists, and then there should be community input. That's what her proposal says, essentially, is what it says. So this is sort of after the fact. And so some of us looked at your PowerPoint before we got here. We studied it. You know, those of us in this, I'm an educator. I'm a parent. I didn't introduce myself. I'm a parent and an educator. I taught in this district for 23 years. I still teach as an adjunct instructor at the university level. So I know something about education, and especially as it relates to this district. So we studied the PowerPoint. Now, the PowerPoint says that tonight you are seeking to take steps necessary to begin the search. That's insulting. I mean, I don't know who it is you're supposed to be seeking permission from. It certainly can't be the community. I don't know who that is. It's even directed at. I read, you know, we read it and said, oh, well, they must be talking about the board. But how could that be? They already hired you. So how could you be seeking permission? What kind of rhetoric is that? You're already hired. So you got permission. The search is already in progress. We've checked your website out. We've been researching you. We're going to continue to research you. By the time you're done, we're going to know as much about you as you know about us. We'll probably know more about you than you know about us. So you put that rhetoric in your PowerPoint about you seeking permission, yet when we go to your website, we see that you have searches in progress from Maine to South Carolina. And guess who's at the top of the list? None other than the Rochester City School District, at the very top of the list. So cancel that kind of rhetoric. Don't come to us with that foolishness about you seeking permission. Now, it's good. It was good to read and to hear Dr. Kastner, and I think you all mentioned it, that you're going to meet with groups. So let me, again, I still haven't introduced myself. My name is Howard Eagle. I'm here as a parent. I have a student, a son who's a student in this school district, and I work with a coalition of people called the Take It Down Planning Committee, Faith Community Alliance, Movement for Anti-Racist Ministry and Action Coalition. Write it down or something. You need to meet with us. We want to meet with you. We have information to share with you. We want to be one of those groups that you meet with. We would advise that you meet with the superintendent's race and education advocacy. I always forget what real means, even though I've been sitting there for a year. Racial, help me with that, equity, yes. The real team, which we believe represents some of the most significant work that's going on in this district. And our coalition has had a lot of criticisms of this superintendent, but just one thing that we agree on. She has done racial equity work that has never been done in the history of this district before. And the president of the board acknowledges this. He just said it at a public meeting here a couple of weeks ago. Anybody who's paying attention in this district acknowledges that. And yes, do know that individual, institutional, and structural racism is a major problem in the Rochester City School District. You got to put that question to all your candidates straight. What is your expertise in terms of understanding how individual, institutional, and structural racism impacts the public education system from beginning to 2018? What is your knowledge of that? How does it function? How does it manifest itself in the curricula? How does it manifest itself in the culture, in the history of who's teaching in our school system? How does it manifest itself in the so-called pedagogy that goes on in our classrooms on a daily basis? Talk to us about that, superintendent candidates. There's one question that you've got to ask them and be very pointed and clear about it. So now, we think you should meet with the Racial Equity Advocacy Leadership Team. If I'm not looking at it, I can't remember it. But it's very important work that this team is doing. And when the superintendent is gone, you ought to ask your candidates, are you going to be committed to continuing the work of real? If you're not, you shouldn't hire them, as far as we're concerned. I don't care what their resume looks like, what they claim they can do. If they're not committed to racial equity, they don't belong here, period. It's a major problem, an issue in this community. Nobody will deny that. It's old. So now, I want to note that at the height of this meeting, there are 14 people in the room, and that includes the staff, you, the search firm, the media, excluding the 9 people up here. 14 people in the room. Now, this meeting tonight is the beginning of public engagement. That's how it was advertised. That's why me and Dave signed up, right? But what was done to let people know about this meeting? What did this board do? What did this billion-dollar organization do? What did this communication department do to tell people that you're going to be here tonight? Do you know most of the, if we got, nobody seems to know how many students we have, but that number that keeps popping up is 33,000. So if we got 33,000 students, we got 66,000 parents at least, right? And grandparents and other relatives and so forth. How many of them know that you're in town? How many of them even know that you've been hired? My question is not rhetorical. Not many. Not many. Not 5% even know that you've been hired to help find a superintendent. And we have the nerve to talk about community engagement. So I'm mentioning this because Dr. Kastner said there's going to be an opportunity for anybody who wants to participate. But if this is the kind of thing you call an opportunity, that hinges on being sick. This is not real authentic opportunity. You have to do work. Do you know who our parents are? You know about, I heard it mentioned, you know about the poverty rate in this city, and so you know who our students are, right? So you know who their parents are. You know that many of them have been failed by this very education system, right? You know they're not engaged for a whole bunch of reasons. It doesn't have to do with they don't care and so forth. It's much more complex than that. So you have to do work if you really want to hear from them. You got to do work to get them here or to engage them where they're at, maybe. Maybe you got to take this to where they're at. They're not going to come here. Many of them are not going to even come here. They hate this building. It has nothing but bad memories for them, for many. So we have to be serious about this community engagement or it just becomes rhetoric. I counted. Dr. Kastner used the term transparency more than 30 times in his presentation. He used the term transparency. I'm telling you, as you talk to people in this community, you will find that that's another major issue in this district, lack of transparency. And how can you, what makes you think that we believe that when you're behind closed doors interviewing 30, even though you disagree. You shouldn't disagree publicly, but you do. That's all right. I guess that's okay. 30 or 10 or however many you're going to have, why would we believe that you're going to end up not eliminating people who we think have more potential than the 3 choices that you're going to trot out before us? We don't have anybody in the room. We don't have well, I take that back. I assume that Commissioner-elect Davis will be in the room, but we understand confidentiality. Don't think we don't understand confidentiality, but we also understand general information that she can share, and I feel confident in saying she will share general information. So more than ever before, we'll have some inkling, but of course we won't know the details. She can't reveal the details. We understand that the process must be confidential. So there's a major issue of trust. They'll tell you large segments of the community don't trust this board with good reason. So you need to know this. You need to know what you're talking about. Dr. Kessler, you got to know what you're talking about. I don't know if Dr. Aquino is feeling offended or not, but I know I would be by some of what you said. You held up the report and said, what's the name of that report and so forth, and I don't know if you even know the dynamics of Dr. Aquino being appointed by the State Education Department to come in here and do a major investigation of what's going on in this district. That's where that report came from. And it's one of, I don't want to say hundreds, but scores of reports through the years, through the decades. So you said, and I didn't know if you were trying to be cute or what. You said the report is not complete because the board hasn't responded to it. I got issues. I didn't believe I should know his statement is not going to stop there. The community hasn't responded to it either. Does that matter? It's not just about these 7 people, what they think. They tell us, everybody tell us, we can't do this. We can't make this improvement without parent and community engagement. We got to have it. It's the critical missing thing in all of this. We got it, but then they don't act like that. They had a chance to involve the community from the beginning in this whole process. They rejected it, and you said you think they made a good decision. Their process is good. We disagree. It could have been better. It could have been a better process from the beginning. But some of them seem to think they're kings and queens, like the people who rule the monarch like that. They don't seem to think that they're, elected leaders. And by the way, we should know that the board is not popularly elected. Only 10 to 15% of the eligible voters in this community even come out. There's nobody here popularly elected. The majority of the people in this community who could participate in politics don't. Sort of like Hempstead. But it's not as bad as Hempstead. I think they said something like, 2% or something of the population even vote. So they are representatives, but they don't represent the whole community. That's, I assume, why the president of the board said, well, let's see if we can put a process in that makes representation greater, broader. But there were a couple board members who acted like queens, and I'm not being sexist, I'm talking about like a monarch, they didn't even want to entertain that idea. Guys, have brains enough to be, I guess was their thinking, to be involved in the process. Some of them don't even know that much about education. So all of this hype that I heard from you about their great qualities, I haven't seen it, and I pay very close attention. We haven't seen it, not just me, those of us who study, we haven't seen what you described. We haven't seen it. That's evident by the crisis that the district is in. The old, quite deep-seated crisis that this district is in. None of this is new. This has gone on for decades. So when you start, some of what you present, maybe you have good intentions and so it sounds like pure rhetoric, ready to move to the next level. What the heck does that mean? What does that mean? I want to see you define what that means. I don't see anybody ready to move to the next level. I see a crisis, a deep-seated crisis, and do not see any kind of comprehensive solution forthcoming. Maybe it is, but I haven't seen it. But of course, we've got to hear from the board in terms of the Distinguished Educators Report, but we also have to hear from the community. We're still developing our position. It should be done tomorrow or the next day. Our coalition has developed a comprehensive response to your report. Much of it is good. You said it's not complete. Much of it is complete. You know why? The report itself begins by saying, so I'm paraphrasing, but this is the idea. None of this is new. There have been many reports. We've known about many of these issues, most of these issues for years. That's an accurate statement. I don't want to dare, because I don't want to make it sound like this big challenge, but I challenge anybody to dispute that. That's a fact. You need to know this. See, I don't know if the board told you this kind of stuff. They probably didn't. They probably didn't. So you didn't answer Commissioner Elliott's pointed questions. I always appreciate your very pointed, clear questions. She asked you, did your firm do anything in Charlottesville to help with the crisis down there where you say you live or got a house there or whatever? You're probably a traveling man. But you gave a lot of rhetoric. You didn't answer the question, so I assume the question was no. You didn't, and that's all right. Maybe that ain't your role. Maybe you didn't work with Charlottesville school system. I don't know. But you didn't answer the question. I surmised, based on what you said, that your firm did not do anything to help in Charlottesville. She asked you, what are you going to do to help us mitigate this terrible national reputation that we have? You didn't answer her. You responded with rhetoric. Those are important questions. If you don't know, say you don't know. Say we're going to figure it out together. That's a serious question. She's telling you, we know we have a national reputation of being dysfunctional. How are you going to help us mitigate that? How are you going to help candidates take a serious look at us knowing that? So there's more to say, but Dave, I'm going to sit down. But I got questions. I do have questions. I don't know how I'm supposed to do the questions.
Well, Mr. Egan, why don't you let
Dave talk?
Dave speak, and then we'll open the floor up to questions. And let me just repeat, when we ask questions, you'll ask the questions of me, and then we're all in the same room, and then the BWP representative will respond. Again, I would give you the same caution that I gave to Mr. Eagle, so the same backdrop. I've been to a number of board meetings where we have had forums, and what people frequently say is, that 3 minutes is just really constrains me and causes people to be frustrated. So we have a specific topic today, that is the search process. You're open to speak to that. You are also open to speak as long as you wish, but please be respectful of the fact that it's not going to end with you speaking. It's going to end with people asking questions, so be respectful of that. And I also want to note, board members are very committed to this process. Some, because of the undetermined nature of when it will end, some may have to leave. Certainly, I would hope that I would hope people could stay while you finish your remarks. But I just want to caution people that if folks have to leave, it's not out of disrespect because we don't have an ending time, and people may have some responsibilities. Go ahead, Mr. Waller.
Okay, well, thank you very much for the opportunity to talk. I've been following this along the way quite closely, coming to board meetings and having conversations. I am David Walling, and I am a retired school principal. I'm also in some community action activities, such as the Movement for Anti-Racist Ministry and Action, otherwise known as MAMA. And it is an organization that includes everybody to take a look and try to address racism in our city and in our schools. I'm also a member of the REAL team, which has been already talked about, and that's the Racial Equity Advocacy and Leadership team, which is amazingly inspirational to me. I'm not from an urban background, but I live in this city and I'm really concerned about what's going on. I didn't know that this group was hired already, the BWP group. I did hear of the group as a possibility, and the way I found out myself was by going to their website and seeing that they were seeking a superintendent for the Rochester City School District. Now, maybe it's just me and my ignorance dealing with all of this information, but also, we have very few people in this room. Where's the community? I don't think it's the community's fault that they are not here. I think the communication ball was dropped. I don't know, but I'd like to know, because this is critical that the community be here for the first step. And my impression is that this whole situation here and what we're doing should stop until the community is here and hears what's going on. Because certainly I can't represent the Rochester City School District or a parent or a community member, and there are many out there that need to be here. You need them to be here. So that makes community input for the beginning of this process a sham. And the other point that disturbs me about the process so far is, from what I've understood it being said, we'll narrow it down to 3. So a group, it was expressed a little more in detail tonight, but a group who are visitors, and that's how they described themselves, visitors are coming here, are going to take this pool, bring it down to 3, and here they are. And I don't trust that. And so the original idea, I have no big solutions, but the original idea of a community grassroots that starts at the beginning to look at this process with the school board would then input what's necessary. That brings up the idea I heard about tonight, the profile. And it's absolutely critical that the profile, as I understand it being expressed, be community-based. In fact, if you had a community advisory committee, they could have worked hand in hand, but also bringing in the rest. And if there is a community issue of bringing parents and the community out, as was expressed by Mr. Eagle, well, then we need to deal with that so we can get the community in here, because I can't see how you're going to get an adequate, relevant superintendent without community input. Valid, comprehensive community input. So I had a number of notes here, but I really want to respect the need to be brief and to the point. Another thing that I'm concerned about is that a group like a firm is racially conscious of the circumstances coming into a school like Rochester. And that firm, if they're going to be hired, and I really don't think it's necessary, have racial consciousness, and the community knows what that is and knows how to implement that. When I looked at the website, I saw on the website the board of directors being 80% white and 20% African American. That's funny, because, I don't mean funny, the circumstances in this district are there's 80% white teachers and 20% black teachers. And we're in a strongly people of color community here that needs to be represented. And so my dander got up when I saw that, because I felt that here we go again with a white dominant firm, corporation, now telling us what to do. And I was concerned that the individual here, with all due respect, said, you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do that. Well, what I want to say is the board needs to say, you need to do this, and you need to do that. because who is serving whom? Lastly, I just wanted to point out some of the things that I have learned along the way. I've been involved in this work with MAMA and racial issues and the Rochester School District for 2 years in particular, but with the Rochester City School District for several years as a volunteer, after-school advisor. And I'm just going to cite what some of the community experts that I've read and truly respect ask in the work that they have presented that's been reported in our news. Howard Eagle says, what is being done to address individual, institutional, and structural racism in the Rochester City School District? Well, that's what REAL is really dealing with. And I'm wondering how this search committee will actually address that, and what requirements the school board will place on them to make sure that that avenue is addressed so we can move on with really making this an effective school district and equitable. As Howard went on to say, racism is built into the fabric and foundation of this society, economic, political, and social from day one. And that was in City Magazine. Somehow that needs to be addressed. I don't have the solutions. I'm a learner, really, but I'm a participant. And we need to address all of that in this school district, as the school district is a reflection of all else that's going on here. James Norman, another community activist, said the reality is that you have a system with a district that is predominantly black and brown and a teaching staff that's predominantly white. The results we are getting indicate there needs to be an intervention in order to improve outcomes. And another, and I'm bringing out these names because they're key people in this community, Franklin Florence, who is so well known in this area as a community activist and mentor, and had an article written about him, but basically he said this, I think it says it all. Since the 60s when he was active, he said, little has changed. So this is a chance for us to start, but with nobody here, how can we change anything without the community? So I guess my question for I'll just make the question here, for the BWP is, why are you, the BWP, relevant to the educational crisis in Rochester? What has Knoxville, Tennessee, Bloomington, Indiana, and Buffalo Grove, Illinois have to do with the Rochester City School District that local grassroots people can't take care of? And I believe that they can. So first of all, these questions need to be answered by the Rochester City School Board, and ask those questions, and I'm saying put your expectations on them if you're going to keep them, rather than they're putting their expectations on you, as I heard it tonight. And I'm saying to the school board, don't defer to outsiders. You have to do your work. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walling. So what we're going to do is, rather than have the people who ask questions take the podium, just speak in your loudest voice. And then how we do this is we would with the superintendent who has to identify a staff member to ask a question, answer a question. You ask your question. Mr. Walling already has the first question on the floor. And then I would just turn to Dr. Kastner and say, Dr. Kastner, is there someone, one of your colleagues, Dr. Mack, Dr. McKendrick, who can best answer that question from the podium? I'm talking about Mr. Walling's question. Why, and I'm paraphrasing it, why BWP? And whoever you think in your judgment can best answer that question. Just take the podium only because it can be recorded there. Thank you.
Are the questions being recorded?
Well, what we'll do is, when the question is repeated, I just don't want people coming back and forth to the podium. No, let me, hear me out, Mr. Eagle. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Dr. McKendrick, or whoever is speaking, Mr. Mack, Dr. Mack, can repeat the question when they take the podium. Go ahead.
Our role is try to identify potential superintendent candidates that meet your profile. Our relevancy is finding those type of people that, in looking at the profile, have a track record of proven experience where they've made a difference with children. And we're trying to assist you in showing who these people are and how people have, through their reference checks and their body of work, have the potential of making a difference here in your system. So our role is not in itself of working directly, but to develop candidates that we would put before you for you, using your expertise as representatives of this community, to see if you think they're the ones that can be the face of your school system.
Any other questions? I know, Mr. Eagle, you said you had some. And please, one at a time.
So, what are you going to tell the candidates, or are you going to tell them about the distinguished educator report? What are you going to tell them? Are you going to tell them what you said here tonight and it's not complete? And that's what it seems to be indicative of they can ignore. Are you going to tell them? Do you know?
Yes, sir, I do know. Okay, excuse me. I'm sorry.
Tell them how that report came about as a result of the state commissioner assigning Dr. Aquino to do intervention in this district, to observe PCs, report back to her, and then the board be in charge with developing a plan to address this. And that's work that the superintendent has.
Mr. Eagle, just ask a question, please. All right, please finish up with your question. All right, go ahead.
Is this how you're going to bring it to them or not? You got to tell us how you're going to bring it. Are you going to bring it so that the superintendent candidates understand this is work that they have to do?
All right. Would you like to make sure you repeat the question? You understood it?
No, I get it.
Okay.
First off, I met with Dr. Aquino this afternoon. We're still learning about the report. And the fact is, I think I shared to him, and I've also said this to you, President White, that the question is how we are going to share the report with potential candidates. Is that correct? And I feel that we have an obligation, excuse me, of sharing that report to potential candidates as well as the response. But I also, when we present our community engagement report after we spend time in your district, when we spend time in the district, we'll probably have 30 to 40 meetings. We'll probably meet more than a few hundred people. When we take all that information, that report will be presented to your board. Any member of the community that attended any of those meetings can see that we have faithfully used their comments in organizing it, and that too will be shared. So we want to have any candidates to have their eyes wide open, and we also expect candidates to do their own homework. They're going to do things like perhaps watch board meetings. They're going to look at some of the test data. They're going to look at your strategic plan document that you have, the path forward. And so it's in our best interest to share with them this information. And the other thing that could probably happen, if it works out that way, these candidates, if they are considered to be finalists and have their day in the city, they're going to have exchanges with members of the community like yourself, and we would expect that to happen. And yes, your comment, you didn't ask this, but I'm going to say, a group like yours is a group that we should be meeting with when we have the time when we're doing the community engagement, because you are a representative group, and I would definitely assume that that would be included. And I just think that's common sense. Our purpose is to hit all segments of the community. And again, to answer the question, we hope that opportunity to talk with you.
Now, Mr. Eagle, I want to alternate. Mr. Walling, do you have a question? Then we'll go back to you, Mr. Eagle. You're best. Okay, Mr. Eagle, go ahead. And remember, please make sure it's a question. All right. I understand that, but Mr. Eagle, I understand that. You can give context. You can give context. You can give context to the question, but this is not the speaking out session. So just make sure it's a question. Just make sure it's a question. All right, go ahead. And remember that he's got to repeat it. Mr. Eagle, go ahead, state your question, and then he's going to repeat it. Mr. Eagle, state your question. I'm not lecturing you. I'm saying state your question, and then he's got to repeat it.
This is related to something that Commissioner Elliott raised earlier. That woman, I don't know if she doesn't want to say her name. Her name is Carlinda Purcell. She was the best candidate of the bunch. They chose John Clark Lazar instead because the union backed him and worked to defeat her. This is what happened. I was there. Now, so that's part of the context of this question. Do you know, and are you going to tell the candidates about the dynamics in terms of relationships between the union and the community, especially the teachers' union, but all of them, because they tend to follow Dr. Admiral Desmond and the teachers' union. Are you going to tell the candidates about the long-standing antagonistic relationship between the leadership of the Rochester Teachers Association, who probably met with us, and everybody knows what happened. I'm going to tell them about this and the need. They will have a role, the superintendent will have a role in addressing that.
Please repeat the question so it's...
You're asking me, are we going to tell the candidates about the long-standing relationships of the Teachers Association and the school system? First, I have to tell you, I do not have knowledge of all the details of that, but I would assume when we go through the community engagement session that we will be meeting with union representatives, but I also think that we will be meeting with members of the public. And when we meet with members of the public, if they bring up what you just suggested, we will record that in the minutes, and that will be part of our report. And that report, again, will be public record.
Now, Mr. Eagle, let me just tell you, you have 2 more questions, and then we're going to sum it up for the night, unless Mr. Walling has a question, because what I heard Dr. Kastner say is that he was going to reach out to you and many other people that are not in this room. So if you have additional questions that go beyond those 2, and Mr. Walling, it seems like you have another question, don't worry, you will be able to ask those questions directly of Mr. Kastner and his colleagues. So go ahead.
Clarification in terms of how this search would be conducted by Dr. Kastner, Dr. Matt, and Dr. Jenner, who are here. Is their role as a team to manage this system entirely, these 3 folks here, or they will be here and they are at the service of the Rochester City School District to manage the system? Is that correct?
Well, actually, you are correct. We have 50 associates with BWP, as you noticed on the website, and all of our associates would assist us as needed. For example, if there happens to be a candidate from the Chicago area, we have a number of associates that work in Chicago, and they will help us in getting into deep reference checks. But the 3 of us will be on site in the sense of doing the community engagements, and all 3 of us will be involved when we present recommended candidates. I do want to correct one thing that maybe unintentionally was said. When we share with the board the pool of candidates, We do not narrow them down, and we never do anything except present. We do not promote, and we give them an alphabetical order. Normally, the pool might be 5 to 7, but it's the board that goes through the decision-making process of selecting whoever the finalists might be after they do their own vetting and their own questions.
Mr. Eagle? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, more they made a statement that I made a comment about the fact that this society has racism at its foundation, in its economic system, political system, dominant cultural system from day one. But the logical extension of that is, therefore, each and every major institution in the society is inherently racist, necessarily, especially and particularly institutions such as public education and mass media, which are some of the most effective institutions in perpetuating racism in this society. Rochester City School District is no exception. That context is related to something that you just mentioned. You mentioned a number of times that you've got 50 associates. How many of our people of color? How many are race conscious? That's the question.
Cultural competency. Well, I don't mean to misrepresent anything you said, sir. But it seems to me.
All right, Mr. Eagle, fair enough, but just let him answer the question to the best of his ability. And again, be mindful, you'll have an opportunity to talk to him and clarify this in a one-on-one session with your group. He's already said he's going to meet with you all. Go ahead.
It's hard for me to answer your question, sir. We're looking for candidates that have been in similar type communities that have developed credibility, where members of those communities are going to say that they know how to communicate with all stakeholders in the community in, I think, a fair-minded way. And those are the types of questions that we're looking for in their track record. We're not going to be able to find that if we have a candidate from Iowa that comes from a place that has no diversity at all. So what I suspect is going to happen in the profile, that you're going to be looking for someone that has comparable experience in communities like Rochester, and there are communities like Rochester, and we have worked with searches there. So I think that's the best answer I can give you, sir.
I'll put my last question, if I can, to Dr. Mack and Dr. McKendrick. Dr. Mack in particular had mentioned, and Dr. McKendrick mentioned something similar. You talked about in Ohio, like the move graduation rate from to 80%, 2% in 7 years. So my question is, what percentage of that graduate, that 80% graduates were proficient, that is, ready for either to perform adequately at the college level or go into the workforce in some, capacity other than a menial position? And when you ask the question, how do you know that?
The question, let me try to bring the question back first. Those students who graduation rate improved, were they ready for college, work, the service, those types of situations? What we did was do a follow-up with our students. We tracked the scholarship amount of our students each year, and we saw that amount rising. We checked the colleges where our students were going. They were going to colleges all over the country, Stanford, the Ivy League, HBCUs, and we also checked our employers within the city to determine if the amount of workforce that they were receiving from the Dayton Public Schools was meeting their needs in the community. And with that, sometimes they were meeting those needs, sometimes they were not. But those are some of the ways that we would track to see just what those performance levels had come up to through the scholarship amount, through the acceptance letters that the schools got. We got copies of all the acceptance letters at central office to let us know where our students were going. And we would follow up with them. And they would come back, and we would have them as speakers in the district to our students who were still there, to try to help them understand what they had to do to maneuver as they moved on in the different branches. We had students come back who were in the military, and they would talk to students about the military and the training that they got and the travel and those types of things. Those were some of the ways we did it.
Mr. Eagle, ours were both basically somewhat similar. We also used, because there was the federal legislation that you have to look at the number of students. Well, this was by the state of Alabama. You had to have a percentage of your students who are college and career ready. And that was something that all of our high schools had to make sure that a certain percentage of your students are high school and career ready, which met those same variables that you had. Graduated from school, from high school, either going to college or had some skill that he or she had perfected or got certification for before they left to go to school, go to college or graduated. Some of those students got associate degrees because we had programs where high school students attended community colleges, and so they got a high school degree and also an associate degree at the same time, and we could easily track those number of students. We had some students that went in Alabama, to the University of Alabama in the early college program, and some of those students started as ninth graders, took, say, a math course as a ninth grader, history class or a writing class, so that by the time that they graduated from high school, those students were probably juniors in college. And then we had other programs that helped a number of our students. Percy mentioned that about scholarships. Central High School for us was it was a low poverty school, high poverty school, low performing school when I got there. I'm not saying that I did everything, but we did change that. The first year we had maybe $2 million in scholarships. The last year that I was there, we had almost $9 million in scholarships that students had. And then the one that we were very proud of is that we formed a partnership. We had several partnerships, but we had one in particular with Mercedes-Benz International. Every C-class car that you see driven in the United States is made in Tuscaloosa. And so we formed a partnership with Mercedes-Benz because of this huge plant that they had out there. And now they make 5 cars out there, I think. But the whole point of it was that if we could get an agreement with them, if our students made a 5 or higher on work keys, that Mercedes-Benz would accelerate their application process, and those students were targeted, and they typically got jobs if they wanted them. And these were, I thought, very good jobs for students because they're 18 years old, graduating from high school at 18 years old, going out to Mercedes-Benz, making $36,000 as an 18-year-old, and that was just their normal pay if they worked overtime. Most of those children got $40-something thousand per year, plus all of the benefits that came with the cars that they could have, well, pay for at a discount. So we had a variety of activities and programs, basically because the world has changed so. And children have to have those skills, and it went very well with a $36 million career tech high school that we put at the urging of the business community, so that when our students left, they could weld and do all those other things, those hand-on jobs that the community wanted and that the business people were asking us to provide for them.
Thank you very much for the questions and the answers. Did you have a follow-up, Commissioner Shepard?
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you to Dr. Kastner, Dr. Mack, and Dr. McKendrick for coming in. And I just can't, I just want to apologize to you all because I want to make sure that you understand that we made a decision to hire you all. and so that you work for us. And I know that the plan is supposed to be for us to give you directives on how we're going to go about this. And I cannot leave this meeting without saying that I'm just totally disgusted with President White changing up the forum and changing up how we do meetings without first letting us know that. And now we've had community members that have come in. They've been able to give their voice and ask questions of you all, but we did not extend that same opportunity to the rest of the community. And so I just want to say that this is just the dysfunction of our leadership here at this district, that we would go through a meeting like this and have you almost berated when we have asked you to come in and help us to do things. So I just want to thank you all for coming in, and I hope that we will be able to have other community members that are going to get the same opportunity that you've given to them.
Dr. Kastner, Mr. Eagle, Mr. Eagle, Dr. Kastner.
Commissioner Shepard.
Dr. Kastner. Dr. Kastner. Mr. Eagle. Dr. Kastner.
The purpose of this meeting was more for a launch to start asking board for direction on some of the issues regarding the timeline, regarding some of the issues that we're going to have to decide. I think that the school system, when we're going to be here on site for the days on the community engagement, that's the time it's intended that everybody in the community should have the opportunity, and it needs to be publicized as such. And it has a whole different level of, I think, in the communication and the publicity. And usually it's the community engagement part, not the launch meeting, that kind of begins that type of momentum. So it's not an if, it's a when. And we hope that we could say that with confidence when we presented the report, that opportunity was available.
And just, again, to reiterate what Commissioner Shepard said, we do agree on this. You have our thanks for appearing today. I don't think anybody is looking at this as the beginning and the end. This is the beginning. You had the opportunity to do what I understood you were supposed to do today, which is describe your process. What we did is just afford people an opportunity, as we always do in our meetings. And if anything happened, we flip what we normally do. Citizens normally speak at the beginning of the meeting. But because what you had to present was so important, you presented at the beginning of the meeting. You accomplished exactly what you wanted to accomplish, your PowerPoint. And citizens were allowed to comment on it. Let me just say, though, for any citizen being concerned that this wasn't, I think Mr. Walling expressed concern that there wasn't a lot of people here, and that's obvious. I think, as you indicated, this is the beginning of the process. And you heard some good stuff from board members and from people from the community. So I know reasonable minds can disagree, but I don't think this was a waste of time. I don't think there's anything to feel disgusted about. I think people had the opportunity to express their concerns, and I also think we got a lot of good information from you all. And by the way, this process is just beginning. So thank you for coming. I think every board member would extend the thanks, and we look forward to continuing to work with you.
Well, we appreciate that, but also we're trying to build a relationship and build trust with you and your community.
Right.
And again, I think this was a good first step. We're learning a lot.
Sure.
And we'll continue to do that. And we look forward for the next time we're going to be in town.
Thank you.
Just wanted to add my thanks, and I appreciate the opportunity to meet the entire team. Thank you.
Anybody else? All right. If there are no further comments, can I get a motion to adjourn? Moved by Commissioner Hallmark, seconded by Vice President Powell. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Good night.